happening, everybody? Welcome to the Storytellers show, hanging out with my man, Christopher Bartley of the Bartley Group. What's good, Chris?
What's goody? What's goody, RK3? I'm out here, man. We out here.
Yeah. Well, listen, I'm so glad that you're able to hang out with me, man. This has been long overdue. I think I've been watching a lot of what you've been doing, sharing some amazing depth of storytelling with people. All of the journeys, the hero's journey. You're telling about storytelling arcs and all of that stuff, man. And so I'm in love with it, because that storytelling is what I do as well. So it was inevitable that we collaborated somehow, man. So tell us who you are, man, and then I'll share with the people who I am as well in just a little bit.
Christopher Bartley. By the way, let me just say, it's easy to ask other people their story. Oh man, but when you got to do it for yourself. The dilemma. But anywho, what's going on, everybody? My name is Chris Bartley from Miami, Florida. And long story short, I just kind of took this journey from being a copywriter, go figure, being able to tell persuasive stories for buy-in, to transitioning to branding, to then transitioning to like strategy, to UX design, to come all the way full circle back to storytelling. So my story has been an interesting journey of just figuring out how do you take all of the stuff that you have learned and culminate that into not just a business model, but doing what you love, getting paid for it. So man, that's where we are.
I love it. And for those of you who have not connected with me before, I'm Robert Kennedy III. RK3 is what you'll hear people call me. And I deal with organizational leaders, teaching them how to communicate confidently, how to share their messages even more effectively through the art of business storytelling. And I'm the founder of the Storytellers Growth Lab. I'm the president of Kinetic Communications. In the Storytellers Growth Lab, here's what we do. We have online courses, challenges, where we work with small business owners, entrepreneurs, people who want to be able to create greater visibility and show them how to do that through the techniques and the technologies of storytelling. So that is the elevator pitch. That went really quickly, didn't it?
It did. Refining mine for sure, especially since the pivot that has been made, which has allowed us to connect, like you said, inevitable from my favorite movie, Agent Smith, The Matrix.
Yeah, man. So what is it? I mean, we love storytelling. I think for me, I love to read as a kid. My mom literally bought every book that she could think of. She would go to the stores. She would go to, back in the day, they call it the book and Bible house. She would buy these books for me to read. And so I always had this love of stories. And so my mom got to the point where not that she was frustrated, but she was like, man, I can't even buy any more books for this boy because he's now reading like my medical encyclopedias in the house. So I loved books. I mean, speaking of medical encyclopedias, you remember, I don't know if you remember, you're probably too young. Encyclopedia Brown. You remember, do you remember that at all? Nah. So, okay. That was these books about this detective. This was like late 80s. This was like the late 80s. So
I was going to say,
books, it was these books that I would read in elementary school. And so, this was like in the 80s. And Encyclopedia Brown was one. And then they also had those choose your own adventure storybooks where it was say, hey, you're coming to the fork on the road. If you want to go left, turn to page 95. If you want to go right, turn to page 132. And so you could read the same book like 11 times. And the stories would be different. So I think that's a piece of maybe where my love of storytelling comes from, because I was a reader. I always read as a kid. Yeah. What about yourself, man?
Man, it's interesting, which, by the way, as you're talking about it now, the whole, if you want to go left, turn to page 32. That is actually a form of story branching, which, now they and you've heard, I don't know if you've heard of, like, there's software that's out there for these instructional design scenarios to help like customer service reps or whoever to pick a particular decision, and based on their response, there actually will be, another scenario that pops up digitally to help them kind of understand the mistakes or maybe the good decisions that they've made. I didn't realize that. When you think about that, that's how the books, back then, in print actually worked. Man, mine I think I was a late bloomer, quite frankly. When I look at, and I always go back to The Matrix, that was I was in the 9th grade, and I think it was my first time having explored movies from an analytical standpoint, where I was in class, and I don't know, it was like one of those honors English classes, they have you do more. Some would say they have you do the most, but I so much appreciate it now, where we got a chance to look deeper into the cinematic films that, we thought this was playtime, right? We thought that this was just it wasn't free time. And to start looking at these things through the lens of the literature that we were familiar to. So I didn't understand, I didn't even know, and my eyes were open to the fact that The Matrix had a lot of Alice in Wonderland Easter eggs, a lot of Alice in Wonderland. And I said, whoa, this is deep. Now, not only that, but I think what instinctively drew me to storytelling was the hero's journey, man. When you get to see yourself as the hero and say, I can do that, or I see myself being that kind of person. So I think I want to say it was high school that really drew me in, but as time progressed, it was then having the mind. I think this is what really solidified it for me. Roger Ebert, when I really started getting into stories and even like ratings and reviews, I started to realize a lot of my reviews reflected Ebert's back in the day, when he was still alive. And I said, I might have the Ebert spirit. I don't know, man. The only challenge was I wasn't able to nail down the mechanics as to why my rating was the rating that it was. I still struggle with that today. But the point is, there was something there. There was something there to understand the value of what makes a great story versus what makes a subpar story. And when I knew that intuitively, I understood the differences between the good versus the great versus the average versus the poor. It's like, okay, yeah, this is definitely my thing. And last but not least, man, the Bible, dude, like it's parables and all of these some people consider them analogies and other people consider them literal or historical, whatever we consider them. The fact that they're just it's chock full of narratives that you then apply to your daily life. Now that's the thing. So when you can take a story and then just implement it into how you're actually living, next level, man. So I think that those things were what influences my storytelling.
So the good and the bad of you and me, right, is that it's kind of like the person who is a architect doesn't just go into a building and enjoy the building for the building. Right? They go into the building and they're kind of like, oh my gosh, okay, that's that type of structure, or they did this, or they could have done this a little bit differently, or they could have added this type of arch in there to make it work out differently. And so it's the same thing. So when I'm watching movies, right, I'm watching or I'm reading things, or I'm watching TV shows, I'm literally breaking apart certain things. I'm like, okay, yep, they used in media res right there. Okay, yep, that they're using a spark line right there. Or okay, that's not, people know about a flashback sequence, but I'm saying, it's more than just that. And so we're looking at the hero's journey. We're looking, we're looking at Kirk Vonnegut's stuff. So we're breaking down all of these different things. So let's get out of the nerdy part of us with regard to storytelling and talk about for a second, why is storytelling this big deal? Especially now, why is it such a big deal?
It's the way that we live, man. It is the way we operate. It's the way that we move through life. Quite frankly, the only way that we're able to even resonate with those things is when we become aware that a framework exists. I don't think I was that analytical about movies or even things that happen in real life until I was able to find something that actually I can lay over that, a blueprint, Which side note, I was an architect major for like 2 years in college before I switched to communications. So go figure, right? Working in systems. Once you realize and your mind is open to, oh, wait, hold on. There's a blueprint that's here. You then start to look at things differently. Like you start looking at when the pre-roll scrolls or, flashes, who actually wrote this particular episode? Because it feels a little bit different. Things like that. So yeah, for me, when you do find yourself aware that there is a framework or a system that's repeatable, it's something that you can apply to almost anything or to certain situations, you then can start looking at things analytically. You then can start looking things almost from a metacognitive sense and step outside of the thing, look at the thing and say, okay, I'm here. This is where I want to be. How did so-and-so get to where they wanted to get to? Or, or even in fiction, like, they rushed it. Every time a plot feels rushed is because we know, even if we don't know what storytelling is really about, intuitively, you're like, nah, you skipped some steps.
Right.
Why you had to do that? So,
right. Yeah. So I think one of the things that really comes to me as well is, as you're talking about a framework, and people say, why is a framework even important? And I think a lot of us have had the emotion or have had the experience of being asked to speak in front of a group, whether that be as a poet, whether that be as in school, as a student, as a manager, leader in business, whatever it is. You've had the opportunity to stand up in front of a group and you felt like you were rambling. You felt like you weren't sure what your next phrase or statement or paragraph or idea was going to be. And because you felt like that, you weren't sure where to land the plane. You weren't sure where to hit the brakes on the train and what station people were going to get off. You weren't sure of any of those things because you didn't have a framework, right? You didn't have some steps or some waypoints that you could hit, so that you knew that you were not just connecting with people, but you were getting your point across and moving them to action. And so, especially in a business environment, that's what this is about, right? Yeah. When we're in business, a lot of times when we hear the word storytelling, people think, once upon a time, woo, we don't want storytelling in our business because it's soft, it's fluffy, it's squishy, but it's a bit more than that. So can you break down a little bit for us? Tell us, like, what is storytelling and why is it important in a business setting?
Yeah, so I'm going to take an improvisational crack at this thing and give a freestyle definition. A story, which is different from a narrative. A narrative is a set of stories. A story is a unit. One particular unit that captures an event or a few events that have to have at least 3 things. At least 3. Now, we got so many different plot points or whatever, but it's got to have at least 3. It's got to have a beginning, a middle. It sounds so easy. And an end.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, can you use more technical terms, please? Can you be more scholarly? Yeah. Right. Go ahead, man.
Right? Like, you need the intro, context, where are you coming from? You got to have a conflict, and then you got to have a conclusion. That's it. If any story that doesn't have a conflict in the business world is not going to resonate. So here's a great example. People don't see their purpose statement or their vision or their mission statements as stories, but they really are. So when I think of Nike's vision, which is to, I'm going to butcher this thing, but to equip every athlete to do their best or something like that. But the asterisk that they have next to athlete, which then qualifies if you have arms, legs, and if you're breathing, you're an athlete, right? It's kind of like, oh, wow. And I had to say if you're breathing because they're quadriplegic people who are still athletes, right? But the point is simply this. It's not a once upon a time, always kind of deal. Maybe you have to send out a memo. And maybe that memo is going to introduce this idea of, hey, there's a change management initiative that we're about to ensue, and we want to prep you guys for that. So let's talk about our legacy. Let's bring up the traditions or the culture that we have now and shift over to how our new value system is going to honor our past while helping us to progress towards the future that we've envisioned. You need the stories to be kind of like the glue to bridge some of those gaps in the storytelling. I mean, and that's just a simple example, shooting off a memo or, an email, or maybe even a presentation for pitches or things like that. And there's so many different, and I know that you have more experience when it comes to dialoguing and coaching executives on a particular level so that they know how to just trim down the fat to get to the heart of what they're talking about. But the point, there it is, to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. Yes.
I just looked that up real quick while you were talking.
Listen,
I'm not that smart.
On their site, and on their site, they'll say who an athlete is. It's every human being, Yeah. And so, but that being said, it's not about this idea of trying to create a cinematic experience in your email or in your workshop or in your, that's not what a story is. A story is trying to capture a particular event that has those three things that we talked about: context, conflict, conclusion, and it has to motivate your team to want to do something about it. I think that's the piece. You have to see story as a tool to make a decision.
So I'll add one more piece in that. So we talk about the context, the conflict, and the conclusion. I like that. 3 C's. All right. I'll add another C into that, and that is character. Right. So who are the characters? Who are the people that are experiencing this thing? Who are the characters, or who are the people that this affects? Who is the message for? Who is giving the message? All of that stuff is a piece of this. So I think what we want to maybe look at then is, you just told us these 3 things. You just told us these 4 things. How does that really affect me in the boardroom? How does that affect me in conversation? How does that affect me in presentation? What, do I need to now go back to everything that I write and say, this is the context, like once upon a time, John experienced this, and then John fell down the stairs and broke his leg, and so we had to do this. How does knowing that framework affect my communication?
To answer the question, yes. the amount of PowerPoints that we have seen in the business world that have so much, it's just burdened with text and bullet points. It's just bullet pointed out of this world. And it doesn't say, what is the heart of what you're trying to explain? Storytelling helps to frame it in such a concise way so that you help the person on the other end to understand, what are you trying to say right now? As a matter of fact, whether or not you're in the corporate world, if you can just remember some, and I love movies. So if you remember certain movies like Margin Call, or for those of you that have HBO, Succession, or other shows or other movies where there's a person who's a top exec, they all have something in common. They want you to keep it simple. Get to the heart. I know you know a lot. I know that this stuff, this is why we hired you. Tell it to me as if I'm 6 years old, please. Like, I need to understand this thing so that I can continue to make exec decisions to keep this company running. And so how do you do that? I'll give you 2 examples. So I did a challenge in January and February for individuals who are in the workplace to tell a story about themselves to reveal their strengths so that they continue to exercise those particular strengths in the workplace. It's one thing to take a DISC assessment, right? Or any kind of strengths finder assessment or whatever it is. It's another one to take those skill sets or those strengths or the attributes that you realize that you're strong in and frame it in my name is John Smith and I have these particular strengths, but they tend to lose its power when I'm in this particular conflict, in this particular situation. So what I will choose to do is 1, 2, and 3 in order to rediscover or reactivate these particular strengths when I'm talking to X, Y, and Z. That's a story, right? That you had the setup, who you are, what your strengths are, what happens when your strengths are lost, or what kind of helps, what kind of reduces them, and then what are you going to do? The conclusion, what are you going to do to actually fix that? And that's for somebody who's like an exec and, very super simple, but that's the whole point of this whole thing. But then the other one is when you're going to like a C-level board or when you're making a pitch, and I think we talked about this, numbers tell stories a lot. But how do you take those particular numbers and create this is where the company is now. This is why we need the new implementation or the new vision, or why we need the funding or whatever because of this particular conflict. They always ask you this question, Rob. You know this.
Yeah.
What are you trying to solve? What is the problem? Conflict.
Right.
And then how are you going to solve it? So
Right.
those are just two simple examples, but yeah, man, it's story.
I like to, and I want to really bring that home, because I think one of the problems that a lot of organizations have, or people in organizations, they're clear on what the problem is. They know what's broken. As a matter of fact, they know what the solution is. They know what the product is. They know what the service is. They sometimes forget who it affects. A lot of times they forget who it affects. I'll give an example. I was doing this workshop for this organization. I don't want to say the name of it, but it was a government organization. And this government organization really deals with people after a retirement age. Right. That, that whittles it down a whole lot. Right. So I was dealing with some leaders in this organization. And there was one person in this meeting, this workshop that I was running, and he'd been with the organization like 32 years at this point. And so when we were talking about the execution of certain strategies, or when we were talking about certain products that this organization stands behind, they were referring to them as just products. And they didn't understand why people were not buying into the initiatives that they had. They didn't understand why people were not saying, yay, rah, 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 let's do this. And I said, well, who does it affect? And they said, what do you mean? Well, we do this for these people, so they should buy this, or they should undertake this, or they should accept this because it's good for them. And I said, yeah, but in the way that you present it, in the way that you market it, in the way that you share it, who does it affect? And so then I asked the question, does any of you have a mother? Does any of you have a father? Does any of you have somebody in your family who you know is at a certain age? And if we don't do this thing, how will it affect them? And they stopped for a second. They said, yeah, if I don't do this. And so we brought it back to the point as simple as a spreadsheet. If I don't do the spreadsheets in my organization with certain amounts of detail, if I just kind of, shove it off, if I just kind of brush it off, if I just kind of, go by it, if I just, whisk by it really quickly, then that quality, or that lack of quality downstream, affects the end user, affects the end person. And I've personalized that as my grandmother. Wow. I've personalized that as my relative. I've personalized it as somebody who I care about extremely deeply. And if I keep that picture in front of me, if I keep that picture in front of the organization, if I'm able to create that relationship, because here's what happens. We look at problems, right? But we don't relate to problems. We relate to people. Right. So we can bring the numbers out. And if we, at the end of the day, start to look at people's experiences and how those experiences affect people, and the connection between the problems and the experiences. And we say, okay, you know what? We have this solution. We've got this thing that we can do. We've got this service that we offer. And the reason that we offer it is because we not only care about people like you, we are people like you.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. You know what, Rob? In user experience design, the more you deeply understand who your customer segment is, the more you understand who the target audience is, your product or your solution will begin to change as well.
Yeah.
How many times have we known or have seen companies, even companies who have invested millions, and there's so many stories that are out there, where they created the product or they created the solution before fully understanding who that person is. In UX, we call that user interviews, where we take them through the actual process, developing customer journey maps around what they do versus what they say, because people lie all the time and they don't even realize it. What I mean is they'll say what they think they would do if they had a website, or if they had an app, or if they had business decision or whatever in front of them, versus in the actual scenario where I'm giving you this thing to work through, your behavior speaks louder. You take all of that information, you take that data, and then you begin to craft the solution around that. So even in UX design, there is the element of storytelling that a lot of people will skip over because, like you said, they assume, well, I'm intimate with this problem. I know exactly what the problem is, so I must know what the solution is. No, because you don't know who your people are yet. You don't know. You don't deeply understand the customer segment. Have you gone out of the building? Steve Blank talks about this, as a startup, he's one of those startup gurus. Get out of the building and talk to the people who you're trying to serve. This is something that I, even as a UX designer, unless I'm contracted to do, even I struggle with that, for my own work, because you can be in your own silo, these innovation silos that they have in the corporate world, where they just take the top minds and they just shove them off into a room for a week or a month or a quarter. And then they come out with these brilliant ideas, but they never talked to an employee. They never talked to any of their customers. Storytelling solves a lot of things. And so if people stop seeing it as a once upon a time text tool versus a resource that can fill in a lot of the gaps to find solutions, or maybe even to dig down deeper into the problem. Because some think they know the problem until they realize, oh, hold on, wait a minute. What we thought was the issue really isn't the issue, because we forgot to look at the context, the beginning, the intro, right? Where we're actually starting. But
wow, our time is like gone so fast. We're almost at 1:30, man. We're going to be doing this. I want to read this comment on LinkedIn here. Cheryl Bennett is saying, so important that we understand the customer end user and humanize them. That is key to understanding why what we do matters. Telling that story helps to build empathy and helps us care more about what we do. Absolutely. Absolutely. I wish I could have brought that up on screen here. For some reason that's broken somehow. Anyway, but this is so crucial, critical, and important. And that's why Christopher and I are here. We recognize that a lot of organizations have been around for a while, and they've been going the same way with regard to their data, with regard to the information that they have, with regard to how they connect with not only their internal people, but how they connect with the end customer. And storytelling is a big piece. So, I mean, there's a lot of different pieces of this. There's your brand story. There is, that internal story that you want to tell. There's, the leadership communication. And so how do you do all of that? And we want to cover those topics. Can't do it all today. So we're going to cover those topics. So I want you to put this time in your calendar for next week, Wednesday at 1 p.m. Same time, same place. I'm gonna go back to as a kid. Did you watch Batman as a kid, like the TV series? Yeah. There we go. Same bat time, same bat time. I used to love it. It was campy, but I loved. I mean, it was the reruns. I mean, that Batman came out like in the 60s, I think. The Adam West version of thing.
That was okay. The throwback. Okay.
Yeah.
Did you have the blue? Was it with the blue mask and the blue cape? Was it that?
The blue mask with like the white eyebrows. Yeah. So Batman and Robin, and everything that happened, Robin was like, "Holy cow, Batman! Holy broken rims, Batman!" So how do we even get here? I just went off on a tangent.
You went off the story script, man.
Yes, exactly. So listen, y'all. Monique. We're glad that you're here. Cheryl, we're glad that everybody else that joined us today is in the place. Come hang out with us next week, Wednesday, 1 p.m. for another edition of the Storytellers Show. We're just going to be talking a little bit more about storytelling and how you can use that to create greater visibility, create greater communication impact in your organization. Come on, Chris, close us out and say something better than I did.
You know what? I'm going to say something that will that will improve my. You said holy broken rims. This is something that I said at the conference that I think that we met, originally met at. if you don't become the hero of your own story, you'll live long enough to become the villain of someone else's.
Ooh, that's good. That is good. That is good. That is good. So I think that's one of the things that people have heard about the hero's journey, and you've kind of heard it in passing. And we think about Superman, we think about Flash, we think about superheroes. But what exactly is that hero's journey, and how can you use that in a corporate setting to really create influence? So I think we're going to talk about that next time. Let's do that.
I think so.
All right. All right. Well, listen, y'all, it's been good to hang out with you. We'll see you next week, Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Storytellers Show. See ya.
We out.